Voice. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Ikhwan, akhawat, brothers, sisters, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yesterday we spoke about why God, and we gave an introduction to some powerful reasons why we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of them included that the existence of God is a natural belief. And we argued that to reject God is like rejecting the real world of the real world. We also spoke about the argument from consciousness, the very fact that there is a subjective inner experience of Mr. Hamza drinking a water, or Mr. Hamza having a gourmet coffee. There is what it is like for me to have a gourmet coffee. That inner subjective experience can only be explained by an all-aware being that created the universe with this ability for human beings to have inner subjective experiences. The other argument we talked about was the Quranic argument for God's existence, chapter 52, verse 35 to 36, which when we apply to the universe, the cosmos, we know it couldn't come up from nothing, it couldn't create itself, it couldn't be created by something else created, it mustn't be created by something uncreated. We also talked about the design of the universe. There are natural laws of the universe and constants in the universe. If they were changed by a hair's breadth, we wouldn't have a life-permitting universe. And we said necessity is not a good explanation. Chance is not a good explanation. The best explanation is a cosmic designer. Then we talked about morality. If I killed a 7-year-old for no reason, regardless if everybody agreed with it, it would still be objectively morally wrong. And we know social pressure can't be a basis for morality, nor can biology. We know it can only be Allah, God, as He's the only concept that transcends, goes above and beyond human subjectivity. And then we talked about engaging with hearts and minds and really penetrating the hearts of our fellow human beings with rahmah and compassion. That was yesterday's summary. Today we're going to be talking about now why Islam. So we talked about that God exists, He is a reality, but now it's about Islam. How do we show good reasons to believe that Islam is haqq, is the truth? I will talk to you about first and foremost the Quran. But this talk is going to be summarized in two ways: the Quran and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when we look at the Quran and we look at the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we could derive amazing reasons or good reasons to believe in the truth of Al-Islam. Let's first now talk about the Quran. Well, once we've understood that God exists, brothers and sisters, there is an awe-inspiring moment within us to find out, is this God an absentee landlord? He gave us the keys, then run away? Or did He announce Himself to mankind? Surely, intuitively within us it makes sense that God announced Himself to mankind. Because really there are only two ways to know if God announced Himself, expressed Himself, spoke to humanity. The first way is what I call introspection, looking within yourself. The second way is looking outside of yourself. Now we can't just introspect and decide for ourselves who God is and what He said, because we would have 6 billion different versions of God, because we're all different, we have different experiences, different thoughts, ideas, perspective, cultures, and education. So if we just reflect and introspect within ourselves to find out who God is and what He said, there'll be 6 billion different versions. So really, if God did say anything at all, then He must have announced Himself to mankind outside of human subjectivity. It's like knocking on a door. I wasn't expecting anybody. So to find out who it is, I have to ask them, who is it? And they'll say, it's me, John. So he's announcing himself externally to my own internal suspicions or speculations. This is why it makes sense that there was a book, Al-Kitab, that was sent down to humanity as a reference to acknowledge who God is and what He said. So the beginning point is to really understand that it's so rational to believe in an external revelation. But one may say, but I don't believe in revelation. I need good reasons to believe in revelation. Well, I want to give you some key arguments on why the Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Argument number 1. This is called the linguistic and literary miracle of the Quran. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, you are blessed with Ustad Nouman Ali Khan. You're blessed with Sheikh Umar Sulaiman. You're blessed with Sheikh Abdul Nasser. You're blessed with all of these Tulab al-Ilm, students of knowledge and ulama. And they have articulated linguistically why the Quran is a peak of balagha, of eloquence. But I want to give you an articulation of this argument that a non-Arab, a non-Muslim, and someone who doesn't even understand one letter of the Arabic language can appreciate. So let's just summarize the argument here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Baqarah verse 23 says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. And if you're in doubt, talking to the doubters, the philosophers, the thinkers, the skeptics, everybody, if you're in doubt about this book we have sent down to our servant, referring to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then bring one chapter like it and call on your witnesses and supporters besides Allah, in kuntum sadiqeen, if you're truthful in your claim. Now we know, according to the classical ulama like Ibn Kathir, Qurtubi, the tafsir of Jalalain and many others, we even have chains of narration attributed to Ibn Abbas radiallahu an. We know that this is with regards to the linguistic, literary style, nature, feature of the Quran. I don't need to go into the details because you have better people to discuss the details with you, and you have attended the halaqat and the durus of Sheikh Ustad Nouman Ali Khan, Sheikh Abdul Nasser, and they discuss the linguistic breakdown of the Quran and how it is a miracle. But what I want to do is take that knowledge that you have and make you understand that you can convey this to someone who doesn't even know Alif, Ba, Ta. And I'm going to start by talking about China. Who's Chinese here? Who's Moses? There's no Chinese people here? Who speaks Mandarin? Español. Gracias. Okay, I'm going to talk about China. I want you to be honest with me. Put your hand up if you believe that China exists. One sister doesn't believe China exists. So you all believe that China exists, right? Who's going to be brave and prove to me it exists? Yallah. He went there. Let's ignore him for a while. Let's assume he didn't go, right? Yes, sir. Yani, stop being intellectual now. Be intellectual in 5 minutes. Why? Tell me. He had Chinese food for dinner. But the thing is, you have to believe someone's testimony that that's Chinese food. If I gave you some spinach with cheese and on top I put some coffee powder, and I said this was a specific dish of the Fufulonians, which is an island in the Pacific Ocean that you know nothing about. If I said this is a dish of the Fufulonians, would you believe me? It's just my testimony. That's no proof. I want proof that China exists. Yes, sir. Your phone is made in China. Well, if I picked up my phone and it said made in Fufula, would you believe Fufula exists? No. Yes, sister. It's on a map. Well, if I drew a map for you, and on the Pacific Ocean I drew a diamond, and I said that was an island, and that is Fufula. I am from Fufula, and I'm a Fufulonian. Would you believe me? It's still testimony. Yes, sir. You can take me there. Have you been there? So where are you going? So how do you know China exists, people? Now you may argue, well, I've seen a Chinese person before. But you have to believe their testimony that that person's Chinese. If I said to you I was Pakistani, would you believe me? Yeah. You would, right? But I'm Greek. It's all testimonial, right? But you believe China exists. Where's your proof? Now the main reason you believe China exists is because some clever clocks, as we say in Britain, said it's tawatur. Mutawatir. It's tawatur reporting. That so many people have gone there who have never met each other, have gone and assessed a reality called China, and has brought back that information to us. To say that China doesn't exist would be tantamount to a huge conspiracy. Now what has this got to do with the Quran? Well, I want to show you, if you reject the Quran, it's like rejecting China exists. Because we have tawatur reporting, we have recurrent reporting of a universally accepted statement that no one has been able to successfully challenge the Quran. As Professor Arbuthnot, he verifies, the famous British translator and Orientalist, he says that although many attempts have been made to challenge the Quran, none have yet succeeded. So if this is a tawatur statement, a recurrent report concerning the challenge of the Quran, you don't need to know any Arabic or anything concerning eloquence. If you understand this is a tawatur report, it's a report based on recurrent testimony, then we could draw logical conclusions. And there are only 4 logical conclusions from this testimony. And by the way, if you disagree with testimony, then you're stupid. Because testimony is a valid source of knowledge. If you study philosophy under the category of epistemology, which basically means the study of knowledge, you see that testimony is a key part of knowledge. This is why Professor C.A. Cody, in his book, Testimony, a Philosophical Study, he says that many of us have never seen a baby born or seen the circulation of blood. But we know because we just read it in a book. It's testimonial. So, testimony is a valid source of knowledge. So, from this universally accepted statement, we have 4 logical possibilities. Ready? And by the way, you don't need to know nothing about Arabic. Number 1, it came from an Arab, right? What do you guys call them in America? What's another word for them? Is it sand something? You don't know, is that on PC? Oh yeah, there you go. See, he said it. You guys are too PC in Texas, man. So, you're not racist, no. What we're saying. Number 1, it came from an Arab. Number 2, it came from a non-Arab. Number 3, it came from Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Number 4, it came from Allah, God. Let's discuss this together, right? Why could it not have come from an Arab? Do you have more money? We could give it for free. I'm only kidding, I'm only kidding. Why? Put your hands up. Yes. Because they couldn't challenge it, right? But why couldn't it come from an Arab?
Because there are things within the Quran that was outside of the knowledge they had at the time.
Forget that, stick to the language. Well, one of the main reasons it couldn't come from an Arab, because number one, they failed to challenge the Quran. Even the best Arab, Walid ibn al-Mughira, what did he say? He said, by Allah, this can't come from a human being. I am the best at prose and poetry. This book, this expression is so sweet, it could not have come from a human being. But some people may argue, what about today's Arab? Why can't today's Arab match the Quran? Well, first and foremost, today's Arab lives in what you call a heterogeneous linguistic society. The Arabs of the 7th century, the linguistic environment was homogeneous, meaning the purity was kept. And these people were brought up in that environment so they could express themselves amazingly in the Arabic tongue. Today's Arab is a heterogeneous, meaning there's linguistic borrowing and different cultures that have affected our appreciation and sweetness and taste of the Arabic language. Go to some villages in Iraq. Do you know how to say chocolate in Iraq? Nestle. Nestle. From Nestle. Go to Egypt and pick up the phone. Telephone. Television. Right? So they've murdered the language. It's called linguistic degeneration. So if the best Arabs in the 7th century couldn't produce the Quran, how could today's miskeen Arab? They are miskeen, wallahi, I don't care how much money they have in the Khalij, they're miskeen. If you move away from Islam, you're miskeen. So how can today's Arab match the Quran? Impossible. So what's the next option? It came from a non-Arab. Why can't it come from a non-Arab? Because it's in Arabic. That's why Ibn Kathir, the one who explained the Quran for us, he says, well, this is beyond common sense. This is ridiculous. The Quran is Arabiyyun Mubin. It is in pure clear Arabic, and you're saying it came from a non-Arab? You're crazy. What's the next option? It came from Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Why couldn't it have come from Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam? Yes? There's a logician in the room. How old are you? MashaAllah. How old are you? You're 9. MashaAllah, he's a logician. He said because the Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was an Arab as well. That's a good answer. Give me another reason. There are many reasons why it couldn't have come from Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Yes? Oh, he was illiterate, but he could still speak. Yes. Good answer. The ahadith, the narrations of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are into totally distinct style from the Quran, and sometimes instantaneously he will reveal Quran, then hadith. What's another reason? Yes, sir.
The knowledge from the Quran, it's impossible for a human to have some of the knowledge.
Forget that for a while. Let's stick to the language first. Well, one reason is, brothers and sisters, is psycholinguistics. You know, in psycholinguistics, when you study a text, you do a discourse analysis. And you find that some of the character of the author is in the text. So when you read Shakespeare, or for some of you, Sheikh Zabur, when you read Shakespeare, you see that his characters in Shakespeare. When you read Christopher Marlowe, you see his characters in his works. When you read Iliad, you know Homer's characters in Iliad, right? And that goes with most texts. The Quran, though, is not in the human voice. It's in the divine literary character. Even though the Prophet ﷺ suffered different emotional roller coaster, if you like, of a 23-year prophetic career. Khadija radiallahu anha passed away. His children passed away. He was tortured and abused. They stepped on his neck and then he snapped his neck in two. He was boycotted from his beloved city, was stoned by children for hours in Taif. But yet, these emotions is not in the Quran. The Quran remains in a divine voice. There is almost a psycholinguistic impossibility for the Quran to remain in a divine voice, but yet it's supposed to have come from a man who experienced all of these emotions. Another reason it couldn't have come from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because every human expression, whether it's artwork or poetry, if you have the blueprint, you should be able to emulate it because you know where the tools are. Take art, for example. Take Picasso. Amazing art. There are many replicas that are as expensive because they saw the style, the brushstrokes, the texture, and they can emulate it. But the Quran, we have the blueprint today. We know where the words are. We know where the letters are and the sounds and the rhythm. But yet we can't use the same tools to emulate the Quran. But every human expression can be emulated, but the Quran cannot. This shows, brothers and sisters, it couldn't have come from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it must have come from? This is an amazing argument because you don't have to know anything about the Arabic language. Anything. You don't even need to know how to recognize the Arabic letters. It's an argument from tawatur, from testimony. So if you reject the Quran, it's like rejecting China exists. Takbir! 1 second. Next point why the Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran is a multi-layered book. The Quran uses one word, but it can have 5 meanings. And these meanings can address different mentalities over different centuries. This book is not only for the 7th century man, it's not only for the 15th century man, it's not only for the 21st century man, but it's also for the 30th century man. And the amazing unique feature of Kitabullah, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that it can address different times and places. Because when you look into the book of Allah, it mentions many verses concerning His rububiyyah, meaning His lordship, His creative power, the fact that there is wisdom in the universe. And many of these verses concern natural phenomena. The stars, the sun, the orbits, the moon. And the words used not only address a 7th century mindset, but also a 21st century mindset. And it's not only for one person at one particular time. It transcends time. Because if you think about it, if you study Aqidah Tahawiyah, or look into the mainstream books, you would see when Allah mentions verses concerning the creative power of Allah, creation, it's not there to give you some kind of scientific detail. This is ridiculous. It's there to make you think that Allah deserves to be worshipped and that Allah has created the universe in truth and with wisdom. But yet these words have multiple layered meanings. Let me give you a case study. Is everybody ready for this case study? The word I'm going to give you is alaqa. The word alaqa can be found in Surah Mu'minun, chapter 23, verse 14. And this refers to the development of the human being. Alaqa, according to the classical dictionaries like Lisan al-Arab and many other dictionaries, has 5 major meanings. Meaning number 1, blood clot. Meaning number 2, blood in a general sense. Meaning number 3, something that clings. Meaning number 4, clay that clings to the hand. Meaning number 5, a leech, or a worm. Look at this multi-layered meaning. So, in the 7th century, according to Greek medicine, they believed the human being was a blood clot. When you go to the works of the Greek physician Galen, and I've read the Greek works myself, he mentions sarcoides and ematos, which means a fleshy substance filled with blood. Interestingly, alaqa also can mean a blood clot. So Allah is addressing a 7th century mindset to think, look, you are a blood clot, and look at you now. Therefore Allah is wise and He is the greatest. Right? But, fascinatingly, when we fast forward into the future, the 15th century, we have the development of the microscope. And when we look at the microscope, we see at day 22, the embryo looks like a worm or a leech. As Dr. Dale Lehman in his book Anatomy Demystified says, that the embryo looks like a worm. Interestingly, the Quran is so multi-layered that addresses all different mentalities that it might not even consider a scientific reality. It might be a spiritual reality. Because an alaqa can also mean a leech. That's like a parasite draining the resources of the mother. And it's like an analogy for the baby. It drains the resources of the mother. So Allah is saying you was an alaqa. You're a leech draining your mother's resources and she sacrificed for you. So lower your wing of humility for your mother. Because you're a leech. And some of us are still leeches. Do you see how this amazing new multi-layered approach really allows you to contemplate on the Quran? But the old approach of scientific miracles I personally disagree with. Because you assume the science is true, but science changes all the time, and you assume that's the intended meaning of the Quran, and you can't say that. But this approach is very classical. It takes all the meanings and it approaches every society. It's not just for the 21st century man, but for the 7th century man as well. This for me makes the Quran extremely fascinating. It makes the book a timeless book. Does this make sense, brothers and sisters? Good. Another reason why the Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is essentially its concept of Allah. Take Surah Ikhlas. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say, God is uniquely one. He is eternal. He begets not, nor was He begotten. There is nothing like unto Him. These provide rational principles. These verses are rational principles. If you use them as a filter to filter every religion, you end up with Islam. Christianity thinks that Jesus is one center of consciousness with two realities, two natures, a human nature and a divine nature. The principles we discuss from Surah Ikhlas are so rational that denies this theology. It doesn't make sense. Take Hinduism. They believe that the Creator is within the universe. Again, the Quran, according to these principles, refutes that. Because, as Ibn Taymiyyah said and many ulama, that the Creator is distinct and disjoined from the creation. Because if I made this lectern, do I become the lectern? No, I'm distinct and disjoined from the lectern. So the Creator, when He created the universe, is not made up of the universe or within the universe. So you see that these principles really rationally remove all other theologies. So this was the Quran. So if the Quran is true, therefore it proves Islam to be true. But let me give you another reason why Islam is true outside of the Quran. And this is based on the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that he was the messenger of Allah. He said he was the final messenger of Allah. Yes, we can prove this by proving the Quran, because he was the carrier of the message of the Quran. But ignore that for one moment. Just look at his life. There are full ways of assessing his claim that he was the final messenger of Allah. Number one, he was lying. Number two, he was deluded. Number three, he was both lying and deluded. Number four, he was speaking the truth. So, you tell me why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam couldn't be lying. Hands, put your hands up. Yes, sir. He had nothing to gain. Yes.
Nobody ever knew him as a liar.
No one knew him as a liar. They called him exactly the trustworthy. Even his enemies entrusted him with goods and resources and things to hold. He was never known to be a liar, to the point when he stood on the mount and he said, if there was an army behind me and I said it was coming towards Mecca, would you believe me? They said, yes, you are the trustworthy. Also, the psychological profile of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam shows that he couldn't have been a liar. I'm telling you, if you claim the Prophet is a liar, it's like claiming your mother never gave birth to you. Because how many testimonies do you have that your mom actually gave birth to you? You have only one trustworthy one. It's your mother's. Your dad and the midwife, a bit, daif. So the point I'm trying to say is, but for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have thousands of testimonies concerning his life. For instance, he was so brave in the battle of Hunain. When the arrows were coming to the army, the Sahaba had to retreat, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam marched forward and said, I am not a liar, I am the messenger of Allah. Also, he was so humble. When someone was so scared to speak to him, he put his hand on him and said, don't worry, I'm just the son of an Arab woman who used to eat dried meat, meaning he's human. When an Arab came and traveled to see him and he went into the midst of the Sahaba, he said, where is Muhammad? Meaning he looked like everybody else. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just for La ilaha illallah, was stoned for hours by children in Taif. He was boycotted from his beloved city. He was so hungry, he tied 2 stones to his stomach. He saw his children pass away, his wife, his beloved companions tortured and abused. There was no smoke coming from the house of Aisha radiallahu anha for 6 months, meaning no food. He would live on dates and water. And you're saying he did this based on a lie? Wallahi, if you claim he's a liar based on this, no one has ever spoken the truth. No one! So he couldn't be a liar. Second point, maybe he was deluded. Why couldn't he be deluded, brothers and sisters? Yes, brother.
Because he came to the later saying that he felt as if he was deluded, and a person is already deluded will never know that he's deluded.
It's a very good point. He said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he came down from the mountain and said, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, to Khadija radiallahu anha, he said, I fear for my nafs. He thought he was deluded. A deluded person never feels that he's deluded. But why else he's not deluded? There are many reasons. Reason number 1. There are many instances in his life that a deluded person could have used to support his delusion. For example, the death of Ibrahim, his son. There was a solar eclipse. All of the Arabs thought that there was an eclipse because of the death of his son. But what did he say in a hadith in Bukhari? He said, no, the sun and moon have their own course, and these are the signs of Allah. But he didn't use those experiences to support his delusion. You know, we have this sometimes. When you're deluded about something like, yes, I must be the chosen one. Right? But he never did this. A second reason, look at the teachings of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is not the product of a deluded person. Number three, look at his prophecies. There are many prophecies of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He prophesied the Mongol invasion. He said the time will not come until you fight an army who have flat faces, slanted eyes, flat nose, faces like shields and furry boots. If that's not the Mongols, then my name is Fatima. Right? That's the Mongols. He foretold that Fatima radiallahu anhu would be the first to meet him in Jannah after his death. He foretold the martyrdom of Ammar by a rebellious group. And there are many ahadith. So how could this be the product of a deluded man? Also, and this for a prize, who could tell me in the Quran where Allah uses only one word to refute the Arabs who thought he was deluded? It's just one word. If you give me that one word that refutes this view, you get a gift. Come on. Iqra, no. Shall I give you a clue? It's in Surah Al-Najm. Wait, that's how many words is that? That's 55,000 words you just gave me there. One word. This is the eloquence of the Quran. So one word annihilates the view that the Prophet ﷺ was deluded. Who has that word? Yes, sir. Majnun, no, that's just describing something. Yes. No. No. La. No. It's in the first few verses. No. No. It's just one word. You gave me 5 words there. No. No. Come on, guys. Who said that? Stand up. Say it loud. Louder. Takbir! What does that word mean?
That means your companion.
Your companion, sahibukum. Your companion is not deluded or astray. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said, your prophet, my prophet, the messenger, Muhammad. But Allah chose the word, your companion. Meaning, you know this guy. He's your intimate friend. You've known him for 40 years. You would have seen the signs of delusion from before. You're making this up. You've shared meals with him. You've been intimate with him. You know him very well. Your companion is not mad or deluded. And it's no wonder in psychotherapy and psychiatry, the first people that the doctors interview are their friends and family. And Allah goes straight to their own baselessness by saying, your companion, because you know him and you would have seen the signs. So we know the Prophet ﷺ couldn't have been deluded. Could it have been both lying and deluded? Of course not, because a lie is wrong, that he's lying. Being deluded is false, and 2 false things don't make a truth. So therefore he must have been speaking there. Do you see how simple this is? The only contention from the Orientalists and the skeptics and the atheists is what? Okay, this sounds like a good argument. It's very robust. It's coherent. But I don't believe your history. They might say that everything you're basing this on is on Islamic history and ahadith. I don't believe in the way you've formed your history. But let me just give you some principles to understand. Wallahi, if someone rejects Islamic history via isnad, via the chain of narration, via our sciences, ilm al-rijal, the sciences, the biographies of people, if someone rejects the way we collected history, they have to reject the existence of Hitler, World War I, World War II, the existence of Plato, Aristotle, Homer's Iliad, even Shakespeare. It would undermine every single history we know in the West to be true. Because the way that we collect history from a Western perspective is not as robust as the Islamic method. Let me just give you some summaries of how we collect hadith. First and foremost, we have a matan. A matan means the text. And in the science of hadith, we have matan criticism, meaning that we also criticize the text itself under certain criteria and conditions. One includes that it must be in the clear categorical language and style of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have matan criticism. And we also have a chain of narration that A told B, B told C, and C produced the matan, the text. Each person in the chain, there must be a biography. This is called ilm al-rijal, the science, the knowledge of people. And we have approximately 10,000 biographical data for people in the chains of narration. We know so much about them to the extent we know if they had a nickname. We know if they were liars, if they lied in public, if they lied in a joke. We know, for instance, if they were pious or not. So we know details about these people. Not only that, according to some criteria, that each person in the chain must have had the possibility to have met each other. And each person in the chain must be trustworthy and sound. Even to the point where our ulama would discuss their age and to find out if they lost their memory after a particular age or not. So they'll take some hadith when they were younger, but not hadith when they were older because their memory was failing. It is so detailed, wallahi, we are standing on the shoulders of giants. So this itself, what I'm discussing, is such a robust methodology. But in Western history, they dig the floor, in the ground they find a letter, and for them this is history. For us, that's daif. It's fabricated. Because who said it? Who are they? On whose authority? So just by understanding a little bit about the science of hadith and the way we collect historical narratives, we see that it's so robust that to deny it is denying all types of history. And interestingly, people say, oh, this is just oral tradition. This is not true. We also have textual, preserved copies of many of the Sahaba that used to record hadith. We have it in Beirut and we have it in Berlin, copies of a hadith. So the point here is, brothers and sisters, we see that how can they claim that they don't trust our history when it's far more robust? Now, but they may claim, but it's bias. You guys are biased. This is not true. Because when someone claims bias, the onus of proof is on the one who claims that there's bias. Where is your proof? Because when you study the mutun, the matan, the text of the hadith, you see that many of these hadiths went against the cultural norms of the time. For example, there are hadiths where women will go to the Prophet ﷺ and show him, and I don't want to be crude here, but their sanitary towels. Have I finished my menses or not? This went against the cultural norms of the time. There is a hadith that says the Prophet ﷺ fell off his riding beast. Full stop. If he's supposed to be your king and you want to be biased towards him, he's supposed to be your leader, why are you mentioning that he fell off his riding beast? Right? So we see that the claim is baseless because many of the traditions go against the Arabic cultural norms of the time. So bias cannot be claimed. Another claim that they have is that your hadith, your ahadith cannot be trusted because it's just oral tradition. Well, the point that I'm making here undermines the whole of Western philosophy. Because in Western philosophy, as we discussed earlier concerning testimony when we talked about the Quran, is actually based on a certain source of knowledge which is authentic and valid testimony. Professor Keith Lehrer, in the book The Epistemology of Testimony, he's an emeritus professor, he says that if we are trustworthy in our judgments on the trustworthiness of others, then we have no right to disagree with what that person is saying unless we have proof. And this is why for a lot of narratives that we believe to be true is based on testimony. We talked about the existence of China, even the world being round. So to reject the oral tradition would be to reject the basis of the Western knowledge in the first place. So I wanted to give you these ideas just to plant some seeds so you can research further and for you to understand that we have a robust history. To reject it is equivalent of rejecting even 911. Because for many of you that was history. It's about 12 years ago. 13 years ago. Is to reject, for example, the formation of Pakistan. Zindabad, yeah? Or Bangladesh in 1971. Is to reject all of those histories. Because they came by testimony to us. So, I give you two key arguments for why Islam. Number one, the miracles of the Quran, which we talk about the linguistic miracle of the Quran, and we showed via authentic tawatur, mutawatir, recurrent testimony, that there is a recurrent report concerning no one has been able to change the Quran, and you don't have to know anything about the Arabic language, and you could speak to non-Arabs about this. You just talk about the four logical possibilities. Did it come from an Arab, a non-Arab, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, or God? Then we talked about the multi-layered nature of the Quran, or when it talks about the creative capacity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it addresses different times and places and mentalities and civilizations to really engage with the text and do tadabbur and realize that Allah deserves to be worshipped. And we did a case study on the word alaqa with the 5 different classical meanings, and I could really be appreciated by a 7th century Arab, a 15th century human being, and a 21st century human being. And we also talked about the rational nature of the Quran concerning the concept of God. Then we talked about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he made a claim, and his claim was that he was the messenger of God, the final messenger of Allah. And we said we could assess this claim in 4 ways. He was lying, he was deluded, he was both lying and deluded, or he was speaking the truth, and we dealt with this as well. So you have the tools, it's very basic, you have the tools now to go out there and articulate a positive case. However, these arguments are not an end, they're a means to plant the seed. The vehicle to these arguments is your character. It's for you to be in the shade of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, rather in his shadow. So you're following his footsteps. That you become a person of empathy, of compassion, of love, of rahmah, of tolerance, of forgiveness. You have to take these values and not just memorize them. Because this deen is not just a deen of memorization. As Imam Malik said, may Allah have mercy on him, this deen is a deen of being. You have to be in a state of being, not a state of knowing. Knowledge is not enough. Shaitan knows Allah. Shaitan knows Allah exists. Shaitan knows the Prophet ﷺ is the final prophet. But that knowledge is not taking him anywhere because he's not in a state of being. He hasn't internalized that which he knows. So don't be satanic. Be Islamic. Which means you take this knowledge and you internalize it. It becomes part of your spiritual and social DNA. Don't become iPad yani. Don't become this iPad. This iPad is hafiz of Quran. It has hadith, books on usul al-fiqh. It has books on aqidah. But this iPad is not establishing the peace and justice of Islam in humanity. This is an alim according to many people's definition. But don't be an iPad. Be a true alim. Be one that when he takes a verse, he understands it, finds out what it means for him, how to implement it. His soul swallows the verse and it becomes part of him. It's part of his spiritual DNA that he becomes it. And this is the psychology of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an. Prior perceptual psychology. You be, you do, and you become. Where is the knowledge in this? You be, you do, and you become. As Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu said, in the last third of the night, cry. And if you don't cry, pretend to cry. And eventually, it will become part of you. So when you have an ayah that says, be tolerant, forgive and overlook, have rahmah, then start to show those behavioral traits even if you don't mean it in the first place. And the more you be it, the more you do it, then you start to become it. Because no matter how many ahadith you have on compassion, no matter how many verses you have on rahmah, it's not going to change you unless you start being it. So be in a state of being, to internalize that which Allah has given you. And frankly, that can only be done if you sit with ulama that give you this tarbiyah, that when they teach you things, they see how it affects you and they can guide you. Even the Prophet ﷺ had a scholar. Who was the scholar of the Prophet ﷺ? Does anyone know? It's Jibreel alayhi salam. It's Jibreel. We all need somebody. You have ulama here, sit with them, talk to them. Let them guide you and help you as brothers. And they can shape you. And the final point, start to do tadabbur on the Quran. Allah says in the Quran, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنِ. Do they not reflect upon the Quran, or their locks on their hearts? So if we do tadabbur on the ayah that tells us to do tadabbur on the Quran, we can imply and infer that the more reflection you do upon the Quran, the more your heart becomes unlocked to receive the guidance and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So be a people in a state of being that when you learn something, it becomes part of you. It's not like you become an Islamo robot, that you have some information and now you think you know something, because true knowledge is in being that which you know. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you with Jannatul Firdaus. See you all tomorrow at Fajr time for the community breakfast also. Bring some nice food, pakora, samosa, food, curries, biryani, bindi gosht, aloo gobi, whatever you want to bring. And bring your hearts as well. And I'll see you at 9 o'clock at the Dawah course.
We're not done yet.
We're not done yet. Well, I'm just giving my salam. I'm done, isn't it?
No, you're not done.
I'm not done. SubhanAllah. Anyway, let me just formally close. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Takbir, summarize or quiz you. He quizzed you enough, inshallah, throughout the talk. But we are going to, I will first of all on the talk, there's three things really that summarizes what he talked about. To be a true believer in Islam, you should have the knowledge. He referred to as an iPad, but the knowledge is one. Number two, spirituality. So you have the knowledge, you have the spirituality, the tazkiyah, and the third is the action, the activism, going out and doing work. So for you to understand the message of Islam, it is about the knowledge of Islam, the tazkiyah of the nafs, and then going out and doing work, inshallah. So this is what Brother Hamza will talk about more tomorrow in his program. We invite you all to be there and to come tomorrow.